There's a couple seats open.
Yeah. Do you want to come and sit in the Yeah, that would be great. Okay, thank you.
All right, we have until noon. And if those on the internet did not hear, if you are joining us virtually, you can put a question in the chat or Q&A box, and we'll read it out live here. I think today's session is meant to be more interactive and dialogue focused than us presenting or slides or anything like that. Yesterday we sort of teed up a conversation around digital wallets and how we would, potentially explore doing something in the metaverse space. And today's meant for, as Ori said, the hard questions. And let's probe some challenging areas of whether this is feasible or not. Wenjing, we already had an early conversation. Feel free to ask those questions in the group context, because my views was just one view of somebody who's not, the best one to answer that. So with that, I think I'll just...
Yeah, and we have these foam microphones. So if we're trying to support remote participants, so if you want to say something, hand them amongst yourselves and speak into them.
Given the amount of coffee, tossing them may not be a good idea, but they are tossable if it's safe.
Great.
We get a general introduction on sort of what everyone's done. Like I haven't seen everyone talk. I've seen some of you guys talk. Is that possible, or is
You mean this whole room?
No, just you. Is it your panel or?
Yes, it's our panel.
Yeah,
I
haven't seen.
We all
everyone.
spoke yesterday.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is not everyone saw all the talk.
Right.
Is that like 2-minute introduction?
Yeah.
Sure.
No, it's fine.
I'll go first. So I'm Ori Steele. I'm CTO and co-founder of an Austin company called Transmute. We focus on applying decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials to securing global supply chains. So I work a lot in the identity standards, certificate and credentialing standards space at the W3C and IETF and various other Linux Foundation organizations working on applied cryptography to this kind of space. And in the context of today, I'm one of the contributors to the technical architecture task force at the Open Wallet Foundation sort of formation stages. And we're looking at how can digital wallets secure digital identity, digital assets, digital identity cards and documentation, and payment capabilities in the context of the metaverse and other contexts. So a lot of focus on just digital wallets in general.
Cool. My name's Kalia Young. My handle online is Identity Woman. I've been writing and blogging under that handle since 2005. That's the same year I founded the Internet Identity Workshop, which our 35th one is coming up next month. I've been active in the conversations, both between the technical and business conversations in the Open Wallet Foundation formation process. And like Ori, I'm active across a wide range of the standards effort within the digital identity space specifically. And neither of us have metaverse expertise, but all this identity stuff, please don't reinvent it. Please use what we worked on. And then this intersection that we're exploring is between the kind of digital wallets that our community's built, along with other communities have built other wallets. And so now with Open Wallet, we're trying to see how do we not have 10 wallets for 10 different types of things? How do we start to have potentially less wallets, maybe not one, but not entirely separate ones for every single different application type. So.
And I'm Mike Dolan. I work at the Linux Foundation. I work on the setup and formation of projects that we host, a lot of the legal work and the governance structures that we put up around them. I've worked with a lot of the identity projects. We have DIF, Decentralized Identity Foundation. We have Trust Over IP that kind of plays in this space. We have a number of different projects like Open 3D Engine, for example, that could be the engine of a metaverse. We have a number of projects looking at other aspects of metaverse, such as infrastructure and networking challenges around it. So I've been involved in a lot of these, and then got involved in a conversation around digital wallets a few months back, and we started getting a pretty strong interest in a number of organizations want to build a digital wallet foundation. And Open Wallet Foundation is the manifestation of that, and where we're trying to figure out where is the opportunity to engage on the metaverse side of things, and also gaming and other aspects and use cases, because we have automotive manufacturers who want digital car keys. We have hotel chains that are thinking about digital hotel car keys, and then we have all the other things that could come up, government issued identities and things like that, if your driver's license were digital. And I think a lot of organizations want some sort of open option, and that's where this has come about. But we can say an open source digital wallet sounds great, but I think that's where, as Rory was pointing out yesterday, the devil's in the details in terms of what does that actually mean? How do we actually manifest that? And there's some levels of policies or values that play into it, and I think that's kind of what we kicked off yesterday, if you weren't here, was sort of a potential architecture and way to potentially structure something along those lines. So, and was that an okay summation?
That was great.
Yeah.
All right.
And then if anyone wants to speak in the audience, just be sure to speak into the microphones, because the virtual audience can't hear anyone that's not mic'd up. So you'll just need to speak into one of the boxes.
Yep.
Just to be clear, and I'm assuming we can take
No,
that.
like hold it and speak into it. Yes.
There you go.
How close do they actually have to hold them?
Like you said, right, so, okay. I'm assuming we can take the conversation
Yeah.
in any direction,
Yeah.
whether it's identification or verification of identification, and the aspect of wallets, and I apologize if I'm not well versed enough to actually add to the value here. As an operator, as a client, one of the things that we struggle with tremendously is identity verification, AML, KYC, onboarding, and then obviously your warehousing of assets, whether it's what you call it, one wallet or one type of approved account, there's another type of approved account, I don't know. The one thing that I have always failed to understand is from an identification perspective, is why can't I? And why can't I, because I'm assuming I have enough unique identifiable characteristics about myself that would make it very hard, I would hope, for someone to replicate my key.
So I think you're asking about what's the relationship between biometric authentication and wallet systems that might hold assets for a single party. Or maybe you might be asking, in a board setting, what if 3 officers of the company need to be biometrically authenticated to control assets that are in the company's sort of pooled asset management structure? And biometric authentication is one authentication capability that might gate the ability to perform an operation in a digital wallet. So you as an individual user might experience biometric authentication today in digital wallet experiences that you're used to using. So for example, if you've Google Pay and you've got tokenized credit cards managed by Google, you might be required to provide a fingerprint on your Android device in order to confirm a payment. In the cryptocurrency space, you could build a cryptocurrency wallet that would require a fingerprint to unlock or perform a transaction in much the same way. And Android provides a series of software libraries for developers to build biometric authentication experiences on top of. And there are a different set of APIs for each sort of operating system that your applications might live in. So for Android, there's a set of key management APIs that might support biometric authentication. If you're building a web platform experience, your ability to leverage biometrics is a little bit limited in web application development land. In Apple ecosystem, you might have Apple APIs that you can tie into if you're building a native experience in Mac OS or iOS. So those are authentication capabilities for biometrics are a building block for building secure wallets, but they're not the only way that you could gate access to controlling assets.
Right. Yeah, I want to add a little bit further than that. So you can conceptually think a binding of you, the person or your biological information to a particular identifier. And the reason that you do need a separate identifier is you, in the end of the day, you need to maintain a digital handle for yourself. So for enabling your ability to make a decision in that digital world, you need a representation there. And that representation can be bonded to your biological information in some way. But in order for you to act in the virtual world, the metaverse we're talking about, you do need a separate thing, a separate number. And that number need to have keys associated with it, and those keys need to be maintained, and they're not very easy to maintain. So there are a lot of complexity bring in, because in order for you to maintain that identifier in the different world, separate from your physical body, that's the cost involved in to make that system work. So there's a bonding between the two, but you also need that thing be managed and maintained. And I hope that the wallet is a abstraction of how do you maintain that thing. You want to be able to control it very conveniently. You feel like it's part of you, but that's the trick. Is how do you do that? It's not very easy to do. So if we can have an open source project collectively solve these problems in the very fundamental layer, in the engine layer, that will be helpful for everyone. And people can imagine how that interact with you personally in different ways, whether through a phone, through thumbnails, through pictures. That I think different product will have different means to do that. But behind the scenes, you still need that number to be properly managed. So I hope that add a little bit to it.
So
That's good.
yeah, great. So kind of a different foray here, a little bit of a thought experiment. As we're going into these new experiences, I have a question that, can you give me the cons if we, instead of having identity as a thread through all of them, what if we broke each experience to be contained, such that when I buy a car or play a game or I'm attending a conference, that's fine. All of my behavioral, all of my experiential stuff exists in that space, but you sever the thread such that beyond that, for my privacy or for others, that doesn't exist. Can you tell me why we can't or shouldn't do that, assuming that we don't want to?
So I wanna break apart an assumption that I think is in what you're saying, which is that that it's sort of like what we have today, where every place you go, you get a new username and password or a name in a particular namespace. So if you have a Facebook account, you have an account in Facebook. I just was dealing with my health insurance. I have an account with my health insurance. I have a Google account. These are all separate today because we have to get our identifiers from those namespaces. And so we could keep doing this.
I'd argue that's not entirely true. I think that you may have different accounts, but I can always link you to everything, because that illusion of separation is pretty weak, right?
So that's identification as a capability in a potentially surveillance-friendly ecosystem. You can identify the same subject, and that's different than that subject having an identity that they're in control of. So, or an identifier that is associated with them, that's recognizing, I see this pattern of behavior, and with some confidence, I know that it's the same person because I have a way to fingerprint the way that they make phone calls, these other sort of capabilities. You can apply that system to surveillance is a capability of certain networks. It's a fundamental reality. We're in a public space. There's a camera on. We're here, we're observed. Whether we're linked as a consistent identifier that's attributed to us, that lives in one or more databases with other attributes aggregated, is outside of our control to some degree. There are identity systems that are kind of built around those profiles that are managed, and there are identity providers that leverage the fact that they provide an identity to you that you can use to log into other systems. And they build better profiles that can provide enhanced experience based on all the information that they've collected. And I think certainly that will continue to happen in the future. There's just now with modern cryptography and users becoming aware of their data rights, their personal data, how it's being used, people have an opportunity to imagine a different relationship with digital identity.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think just to finish the thread I was going on, right? So this sort of division of self between different systems with different identifiers for each system. The good thing about what we have now, potentially with the decentralized identifier and verifiable credential standard, is to invert that paradigm where individuals are generating their own identifiers. If they choose to, they can use those identifiers across many contexts because they're decentralized, they're not per context. And the verifiable credentials also delinks identifiers from attributes. And so because you've delinked those in kind of how the architectures work, now you can present attributes that you want to across many contexts and not have to, back to the issues you were naming, I can get KYC'd once, or I can even get a digitally native assertion from an authoritative source like a government that says, you know, I am Kalia Young and I live at this address, and it's coming from the government, and only I, because of our new architectures, we can do verifiable presentations. So knowing information about someone is no longer an ability to impersonate them. And that's another breakthrough that's sort of underreported about the technologies we've been working on, which is really key to fix the broken KYC system, which today is based on knowing information about people must mean that you are that person. So I'm excited about what we can do, but we'll see.
I think there's other aspects of the built into KYC, because it's not just identifying who the person is. There's other things about the history, or other elements that their policy is warranted to inquire or explore. And so there's things about location and what country they're from and where they have other accounts and things like that. So it goes beyond just identity in KYC too. But I think if you were to apply KYC concepts to a metaverse or a digital realm, you can imagine having to link a lot of these different elements that Kalia is talking about and bring it together in one package of, here's me presenting my portfolio of self. If I expand KYC into a portfolio of self, and so I think that's the possibility of bringing it together.
Yeah, so one of the questions I kind of have, I think we're all kind of assuming that there's some level of privacy preservation. Is that something that will be feasible, right? And I mean that in the sense of, yes, you can potentially use applications with identity to choose your level of privacy, but are there specific constraints around what we are aiming for at a bare minimum when we talk privacy?
So I almost never use the word privacy. No, but I also don't think that word means much, and I think there's a kind of industry that's built itself up around using the word that isn't practically doing anything technically. I think oftentimes when the word is used, it means control. And I think that's what we've been working on, is architectures to support how much information you share, when and where, and to, I actually think, addressing the surveillance issues that we have, until we have tools in the hands of individuals to be able to prove who they are reliably from their own kind of center of agency, the data broker industry will exist because it's solving a business problem now that industry has. And so yeah.
I mean, I think the word privacy feels to me very B2C focused. It's about consumers. Consumers have privacy. Governments, and companies, they might not have privacy to the same degree. I think the word confidentiality is maybe a better word to have in mind. When you hear someone talking about something with respect to privacy, if you're looking for the sort of business analogy to it, maybe imagine the word confidentiality instead. Businesses have a right to protect information about themselves. They have a right to engage in legal agreements where they share information under, a contract. The key, I think, to the question you're asking is, what is the sort of social contract for confidentiality in the metaverse going to be like? Is this going to be like that terms of service that you click through every time you try to get to a website to do something? What did you just agree to? What will the implications for you as a consumer or you as a business in that world now be based on what you've just agreed to? I think there has to be some understanding and consent from the entity agreeing to a contract in order to build advanced capabilities that come from information sharing. But we have to communicate that, in ways that are understandable and clear and transparent. If we're in agreement that, I'm going to share this information with you because it's important that I share my medical record with you because I'm participating in research for something, important I believe in. I want my data to be part of finding the cure. That's my choice as an individual. As a business, I might choose to provide insights to software management companies so that they can improve their experience in that world. And I'm inviting beaconing. I'm going to submit crash reports. I'm going to contribute back. But at the same time, I might be really paranoid and fearful. And I don't want to provide any traces to a potential threat actor on the network. And that's my choice.
We have a question from the virtual audience. Tim Bird asks if there are any existing GitHub repositories that we can examine to see the technologies under consideration for Open Wallet, and if not, what is the ETA for those?
Okay.
A lot of that's under discussion. The project is not formally launched, so there's going to be a time delay between now and then, but we are starting to have collaborations and discussions. Code bases, there are some companies and organizations that have code bases they're thinking about contributing, but it's kind of a chicken and egg, which is, companies don't want to say, hey, we'll contribute this if nobody wants it. And right now they don't even know who would make the decisions about what would be accepted. So we're still working on the governance aspect of setting up the rules around the organization, getting all that in place so that we can start to have more focused conversations on code bases. I think right now there's a lot of conversation around, regardless of any one code base that might be out there or somebody might try to offer, what are the architectural principles that we should be looking for, and what is sort of the overall design of the architecture that would make sense for taking on this type of ambitious effort, if I might call it that.
Yeah, I think there are code bases that have architectural ideas, and there's lots of open source software that's been developed to support digital identity and digital credentials and digital wallets that are in the wild under various licenses. They're available on GitHub. If you're searching for decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials on GitHub, if you're searching for wallets on GitHub, you will find open source software. You should check the licenses and see whether it's something that you're interested in looking at. But as far as the architecture task force, what we've been working on so far, it's mostly been sharing mental models of the wallet ecosystem and space. What are the components and the modules that go into building digital wallets, regardless of where they are, whether they're a cloud wallet, whether they're a web extension wallet or a native mobile application experience. So we've been creating pictures to sort of describe the ecosystem to date. But as was mentioned, the initiative is very young.
Do you have a follow-up question, by the way? I think
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
So I have a question kind of about the planned scope of Open Wallet. How much of it is going to focus on I'm sure you're going to work a lot on the algorithms for federation and all that kind of stuff of making sure it's usable to everyone, but how much focus is going to be on the end user and ease of use for end users to adopt the technology? I mean, I can speak from the Linux Foundation networking experience. We're always good at creating cool networking protocols and stuff, but when it comes to making them accessible to end users and adopters, we're always run out of time, and yeah, we'll do it in the next release. So is it planned for Open Wallet to focus on kind of the end user?
That's a great question. I think it's unclear. A lot of the focus has been on asserting that the project is really going to center its work on core libraries and tooling for entities like banks and other institutions who want to have provide wallets to their customer base. How much those institutions want to support user experience development within the foundation is going to be really up to them. I think it would be good if it was supported, but it's not clear yet.
I think there has to be some amount of it in the foundation space, because if we build something that's just extremely complicated for any company to pick up, I think it's going to be challenging for adoption. So I think it behooves us to enable good end user experiences delivered. The Open Wallet Foundation, just to be clear, if you weren't here yesterday as well, it's the design goal is to provide 80% of what you need to provide that digital wallet as a product. And so if you're a bank, or if you're a Toyota or a car company or something like that, this is 80% of the code that you need, and you can get there. The end user experience, what theme or what, sort of color schemes you use, all those things are going to be things that are going to be configurable, by the end delivery person. But I think one of the things we've learned from the gaming experiences and elsewhere is that the onboarding experience is where you make or break in terms of digital wallets. And so I think having a good onboarding experience and the workflow and the architecture that supports that is going to be absolutely critical, and I see that definitely within the scope of the...
Yeah, I would disagree a little bit on whether that user experience is just the colors and the icons on the page.
I was simplifying that very, very much. So yeah. Go ahead, though. Expand on that.
To his point, because to me, how I feel comfortable about sharing my data with a company is, and maybe that in the future that's going to be a different thing, because needle in the haystack search for data doesn't really matter anymore, whatever. But if I want to be in like a virtual avatar in a particular space, and I'm spending, and I'm doing, and I'm interacting, and I'm immersed, how do I know what I have? And why are we making it super complex for me to figure out that transaction system? And so, like, I would think that you would start with the mental models first, and then create an architecture that supports the mental model, and then see how the banks might be able to support that mental model.
So there's definitely, we're talking about wallets. They store value. You don't want to get robbed the second you enter a new virtual world. So there's going to be parts of consent management, parts of security and sort of alerting and prompting that are going to be really important components. If you're looking at the cryptocurrency wallet ecosystem, a lot of the focus has been preventing fraud or phishing or other kinds of attacks that are built around the protocols that allow for the transfer of digital value. So this is definitely going to be parts of that user experience are definitely going to have to be addressed. There's no way around it. You're going to have to ask for consent before transactions are signed that are moving value. You're going to have to ask for consent before you mint a new digital item in a world or things like that. And how do you communicate that enough information to the user to make that informed decision so they're aware of the permanent effect that this is going to have on their value that they hold, while at the same time not confusing them and tricking them into engaging in activity that maybe isn't in their best interest. So,
like down to the level of reading the smart contract.
Yeah, it gets very deep very quick.
Oh, we're almost at time.
Oh.
I feel like we're just getting to a jog.
Okay. Yes.
I should mention there's another Birds of a Feather session almost at the end of the day that I'll be running. And the topics, there's been several presentations on identity-related stuff, and it's totally okay that the topics merge together. So Hart's got one tomorrow as well.
Me too, tomorrow, if we can talk about all this. So like all the privacy stuff, I can
Yeah,
talk
go
about.
ahead.
Yeah, I have things that I didn't say because I wanted to hear questions. So like if you're interested in all the stuff we talked about now, come again to both my Birds of Feather and Hearts, and we'll continue the good conversation.
So just
Annie,
a very quick question, sorry. So when we talk about digital wallet, and we're talking about is people's data and stuff. So obviously there's a GDPR, there's a HIPAA, all those compliances. So are we taking that into consideration in this digital wallet project? And if we are, what are they?
So in the context of at least some of the standards at the W3C, decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials, a lot of the language in those standards uses the word controller intentionally because it's a meaningful word in the context of GDPR. We use the word subject intentionally because it's a meaningful word in the context of GDPR. That being said, the implementation of these standards have to comply with the region in physical real world space with a natural sovereign and laws that govern, these spaces. So I think it's important to think about where are the servers going to be and what laws will they have to comply with to create a virtual experience while operating inside of a legal jurisdiction.
Yeah, a lot of interesting legal conversations we had too, especially if you think of like fraud in a metaverse and how do you roll back those transactions? How do you put it roll back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
That was
You can show them the smart
Good
contract.
question.
Will they understand it?
So, would you mind repeating just what you said? I think it's important.
So my question about the metaverse and all things in general, most people have no understanding of what it means. Most people don't even understand what an NFT means. How do you possibly give consent when you absolutely have no understanding of what's going on? Never mind smart contracts, they don't even understand contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a real.
I agree with that. But I also see my kids clicking consent on virtual reality systems that they're using today, which is not far from a metaverse implementation.
Yeah.
And is it, what are the ethics of education going to be towards this? Like, is it our job? Like, we're talking about here, computer scientists, the cryptography posse, like you guys know more stuff than we've got gamers. We know a lot of stuff. We're probably in the 1 percentile, but when you have an average person, whether they're, say, a police officer or a fireman, and we've moved to this digital currency where they had no choice and they have very little understanding, how do we govern that in such a way that it's fair for everyone, where they don't have a chance to really, truly understand what's going on under the surface? Those are sort of the questions I really worry about.
If I may.
Use the box.
It's a great question. But from the point of view of a client or a bank, we always have a choice. And it's the reason why we haven't raced into a space, because most of us don't understand it. And most of us know that if we race into it unknowingly and not being able to gauge the risks and the consequences associated with it, there is an enormous amount of reputational risk to all of us. There's an enormous amount of capital risk to our clients and our shareholders. And I think that the answer to your question is, whose job is it? It's everyone's. If you truly believe in the technology and you do believe that it has value to all of us, then it's your responsibility to teach us. That's not to say that we're not going to try to teach ourselves, but I don't even know where to start. And it all looks very scary.
Okay, last thing, but okay, if that's going to be the case, here's a hypothetical. You buy the digital Mona Lisa with an NFT, and you pay $1 million for it. You're very, very happy. But then what you don't realize is that the actual data for the Mona Lisa is insecurely stored on some server, and someone swaps it out with a poop emoji, and all you have with your NFT is the receipt and a poop emoji, and your Mona Lisa is gone forever. Who's responsible? Who's going to take care of that? And we can't say
That's a really great problem to end on. I think the good thing is that the verifiable credentials stuff is a bit more secure than the NFT world, because there's no standards in that world.
I think I would differentiate NFTs and cryptocurrencies from what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And
Corey?
Part of the answer there is that
I don't know.
this isn't a recovery, but it's a prevention thing. Is that if you have software that is guiding users, that is fiducially responsible to the user, and you buy an NFT, it should at least advise them, if not automatically, retrieve a copy of that Mona Lisa, so that there's not a chunk of the asset that they simply have no access to. They can go get the Mona Lisa just like anyone can, right? That's the way NFTs work in their kind of weird creation state. I'm not a huge fan. But my point is that the software can take a huge role in advising the user on what they ought to do. And there's not one answer to this. There's like how we put 7 things together to sort of shore up advising users of the way that they're informed in order to make this actually work. And one of the pieces of software, there's another one that in all of the sessions that we covered, there are a huge list of topics that we did not have time to cover, which is an unfortunate reality at the time. But one of those that's emerging is governance, in the fact that in addition to understanding what I'm agreeing to, we don't have good infrastructure for people to express opinions about who's trustworthy and for what. And one of those pieces is under active development, so that you can actually be advised, like, oh, I'm off of Ori's hat. The EFF has a good opinion about this organization, or the EFF has a bad opinion about this organization, and then I, as a user, can sort of see those opinions. Maybe my bank has an opinion, maybe the U.S. federal government has an opinion. I can see those opinions and then be advised of those opinions when I make a decision.
Yeah.
And so that's not the whole picture at all, but I believe it's one useful piece of it.
Yeah. Does anybody here vote in California? Like, the propositions, like, how on earth do you decide
Right.
some of these things by yourself? Like, I have no idea what a bunch of this stuff means, and I can only vote based on based on the opinions of others, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of this stuff, this is already happening in the real world. Like, when I vote on like proposition like 17 XYZ-3, right? I have to I can read the proposition, I probably have no idea what it means, and then I say like, oh look, these are the organizations that I trust. If they support this or they don't support this, I'm going to vote this way.
All right, I'm going to have to put a pin in this one. And Sam already pointed out other talks where we can cover this, but we are impinging on the next speaker's time, and I want to give them an opportunity. Thank you both.